Today on Keynote.
And I don't think as an industry, we've done enough talk about business continuity. I think many people just said, that's cyber, that's the CIO's job. And it's really not. It's a shared game.
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Our Keynote show is designed to share conference-level value with you every week. Now, let's jump right into the episode. All right, it's Keynote, and today we're joined by Al Smith with Lifepoint Health. Al, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've had several conversations in the past, and I don't think we've ever captured a show. Have we ever done a show before?
No, we've only known each other, for 6 months, 8 months?
6 months. First time on
Maybe
the show.
A year, something like that.
All right, for some people might not be familiar with Lifepoint, give us the short blurb on Lifepoint Health. Where do you serve? What's the focus of Lifepoint?
Yeah, so Lifepoint Health is a for-profit health system based here just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. We have 58 acute care hospitals spread across the country. Think typical hospital for us is 100 to 200 beds, so more of a rural health play. And we have 45 rehab hospitals freestanding, and we're number 2 in that market, and adding those, about 8 to 10 of those a year. And then a year plus ago, we got into behavioral health, and now we have 23 freestanding behavioral health hospitals, about 2,500 employed physicians as well. So a little over 10 billion as of last year.
Wow. And you guys are going in a lot of different directions. Are they very different to manage? Or are they similar systems across the board?
They're different systems. Well, a couple of things about us. We're a private equity owned. We've been in acquisition mode for all 25 years plus that we've existed. So there are different systems. Now, there are some commonality. We're in the process of collapsing to one ERP system and getting everybody on that. Because right now I have 4 payroll systems and 4 Chrono systems, just a lot of debt when you do a lot of big M&A. So we're in the process with that. We run a lot of different EMRs. Most of that's in the acute care side. We're a lot more formulaic or standardized on the post-acute, but they are slightly different businesses. They bill differently. The regulations are different. Some of them are up under like MUPI, other ones aren't. So it is a challenge.
That sounds like every day could be a different day for you, depending on what's going on and what's coming down the pike. Before we go down this path, I'd love to hear more about your journey of becoming a CIO at Lifepoint. What prepared you for this, and how did you end up in this role?
Yeah, a little bit of an accidental IT person, accidental CIO. I can't say that, way back when, well, to be honest, when I started more than 30 years ago, there weren't CIO roles. So I don't know if any of us sat down and said, I want to be a CIO someday. Those roles, as you know, they didn't exist, right? So I was a finance undergrad, grew up in Michigan, went to Michigan State, and ended up going to work for Anderson Consulting. To a good friend of mine encouraged me to go the Big 5 route, telling they would teach me a lot in a very short time period, and they did. So that's kind of how I ended up in IT. I worked in a number of different industries and then eventually made it into healthcare, first in health plans and then into health systems. I've worked for not-for-profit, for-profit. I've been a CIO now for about 14 years. I've been with Lifepoint 6 plus, but if you go back to 4 different companies that have merged, if you go back to one of those root companies, I've been with the same company. I like to tell people I haven't moved, but I've worn 3 different logos in those 14 years. So it's been kind of interesting to go up that way. So kind of fell into it. This wasn't really the plan, being a finance major, but I got into IT and I just loved it. I get bored easily, so I just love the challenge. You're always learning something new, whether it's a business process or technology, sitting in the seat that I do.
What's a pivotal moment or person that shaped your approach to the role that you're in now, the CIO or healthcare technology leadership?
Yeah, throw out a couple. If I go way back to how did I get into IT, there was a good friend of ours, a neighbor who ended up being a Fortune 50 CFO. And, I was a finance major. I thought he'd go into banking or something. At that time in the 80s, everybody wanted to go to Wall Street, all that kind of stuff. And I had a good friend and quite a bit older. And he just said, you know what, you got a couple offers, go work in the consulting side for a couple of years. You'll learn a lot about yourself. They'll teach you a way to think. They'll give you a lot of responsibility, either sink or swim. If you hate it, do it for 2 years. Go back and get your MBA and do something else. And so that was part of how I got into IT, was just listening to him and taking his advice. And I've thanked him several times since. And he changed my life in a lot of ways. The other one I'd throw out is when I first became a CIO, I worked for a really good CEO, and he gave me a lot of latitude, had a lot of trust in me to kind of build a team really from scratch, do a lot of system conversions and kind of take in a different trajectory. And he really shaped a lot of just management style. I really liked working for him. He gave us enough freedom to fail a little bit. You don't bet the farm, but try things. Don't be afraid to try things. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. And he always taught me to always just keep moving forward. Sometimes it's not graceful. You're not always sprinting forward. Sometimes you stumble, but just keep moving forward, keep making things better day by day, make them better. And I've always kind of taken that with me.
I've changed the format of the interview a little bit because I want to start getting how CIOs think out there. And one of the things I started doing, and you're only the second person I've done this with, but it's the CIO Escape Room. So you're familiar with what an escape room is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to get your, like, how you approach certain things. So the first CIO Escape Room is the legacy system. Let's call it the legacy system labyrinth. All right. So you're at a health system with mission critical systems, ton of legacy systems that are increasingly unstable. Exit requires balancing the immediate stability with future innovation. How do you approach that? How do you make things stable that you have, but still figure out a way to innovate in the future?
That's a balance all the time because we've got quite a bit of, if I look at my EMR stack, I've got all kinds of stuff. If it's made, we have it. So I get to deal with this all the time. I think there's a couple things. First thing I would do if I went into that, I'd start to risk stratify. Obviously, there's certain systems. If you can't get payroll out, I'm not here very long. If I can't get some other things done, I might be able to kick it down the road a little bit. So I'd start to risk stratify. And then I'm very comfortable taking a look at partnerships. So can you have somebody cloud hosted? Can you give it to somebody? Maybe you don't have a good support team. Is there somebody? I mean, I've leveraged other health system support, one-off applications that I didn't know much about and I didn't have good skills. So how do you use partnerships to see how you can shore up either your team or your technical skills or your data center or whatever you need to? So I'd start with risk stratification and then start going down through, what's going to fail? Is this a technology issue? Is it an application sunset issue? And then anything we do in terms of application rationalization, it's got to have a good business case. And unless it's just imminent going to fail in the business, then you start talking business impact. And I think that's always super helpful is that you have to learn to translate these types of risks into what does it mean to the business? I think too many times we talk tech. It's going to go down. I don't care. What does that mean? We can't pay anybody. Oh, I get it. That's bad. But don't talk tech, talk business ramifications if we don't do something so that they understand the risk with you. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this risk is shared risk. There's never enough money to eliminate all risk. What risk are you going to mitigate? What can you mitigate? And then how do you go about it?
Going back, so you've been in this role for quite a number of years. How has it evolved? I mean, you clearly have a very strong business background. You're able to speak business, but it's also important to be able to speak technical, speak technology, if you will. Has that evolved over the last, 15, 16 years that you've been in the role? And which of those do you speak more today, business or technology?
I'd say it's about 50-50. It depends who you're working with. Obviously, when you're with your internal teams, or then you're probably talking a little bit more tech. When you're talking to business, you need to talk about use cases. You need to talk about innovation. What does it mean? How are you going to grow the top line? How are you going to decrease costs, increase efficiency, something? And so I'd say it has changed, and it's probably less tech and more business enablement and less hardcore tech. I've heard other people say this, and I think the same thing. Sometimes my role is chief translator. So when people go, I want AI, I start with first, what is it? And let's not talk tools. Let's talk, what are we trying to do? Because no tool is the answer to everything. So let's talk to use cases, and then we back into technology that supports whatever we're trying to do. If it takes cost out in the HR process, it may not be AIL, it might be a RPA, it may be something else. So, but I would say it's changed, and we talk business more than pure tech that we might have done a few years ago.
So another escape room. This one hits a little close to home. We've had a couple of these over the last couple of years, and it is partner failure, right? We've had Kronos in the cloud go down for an extended period of time. We've had Change Healthcare go down for an extended period of time. So partner goes down, systems go down that are partner type systems. How do you do that? Some of these are pretty well knitted into the fabric of what we do every day that it's hard to extricate them. How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. I think it's interesting because we pride ourselves in running pretty efficient. We run pretty low cost. And one way to do that is to get to one thing, right? Run one contract, one vendor, everything goes through Change Healthcare. And it's been interesting post that we've changed the dialogue to, well, maybe we should have two. Maybe we should spread the risk a little. So on one hand, I want to get efficient and drive my costs down. On the other hand, I'm like, I may pay a little more, but now I've mitigated risk. So there's been some of those discussions, which has been interesting because until some of those happen, it was always get to one, drive the cost down, don't worry about it. I think the second thing is done is, and I've used this with our COO, we need more focus on business continuity. I own cyber and getting us back up as the chief operator. You need to own how do we continue to operate in a degraded environment? Because it's going to happen to us. You mentioned those couple, but as you know, there's a number of health systems that had their EMR down for 6 weeks. I'm working hard to bring it back up. How are you going to continue to process orders and lab results and specimens and drugs and all that stuff? And I don't think as an industry, we've done enough talk about business continuity. I think many people have just said, that's cyber, that's the CIO's job. And it's really not. It's a shared game. So I think that's changed to some degree. And because of some of these big issues, change the conversation and people get it more than maybe they did in the past.
Yeah, we had a 229 meeting, and usually we have the technology folks all ask the question, who owns business continuity? And they'll say, well, it's got to be shared operational and strategy. I did one where it was all the rev cycle leaders. So it was just rev cycle leaders in the room. I said, who owns business continuity? And they all said, IT. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. It's like, we're trying to get that message out that, hey, this is an operational problem, probably more so than a technology problem, but it's been a tough message to get out there.
I think some of that comes back to being that chief translator a little bit. What does business continuity mean? It doesn't mean the same thing to different people. So you've got to come up with a common lexicon and then get everybody to kind of agree to what that is. And that can be a challenge with some people. Once it hits, it's pretty obvious whose responsibility is because we're buried trying to, decrypt PCs, et cetera. I'm not there. What are you going to do? So I hate to say that, but sometimes the best test is a change healthcare or event that kind of forces everybody to say, what are we going to do? So it's been interesting because it's a matter of when, it's not a matter of if these days.
Nothing teaches like lived experience. Let's go down this path. Let's start with data strategy. Unified system, unified data lake, or specialized data ecosystems. Which direction do you think makes the most sense for a modern CIO today?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit of both, but we've got a strategic partnership with Microsoft and then with Palantir. One of the challenges for us is because you have all the different business units and I run a lot of different EMRs. I can't ride one vendor. I'm not all Epic. I'm not all Cerner. I've got a little this and a little that. And when you buy things, you've seen one Meditech, you've seen one Meditech, you've seen one MedHost, you've seen one Paragon, right? So data normalization is incredibly difficult in that environment. So I would say I would lean more towards unified data lake. But then you've got to have some data marts. No, maybe those are just part of a unified data lake, or you're pulling them off physically. I mean, there's some different ways to architect it, but our goal is to get everything in one data lake. I call it almost like a back office integration where you're pulling all the data. And if you can pull all that out and let people make decisions, what we're trying to do is mask the fact that we have so much disparity up front.
Classic, build versus buy.
We are a buy company for the most part. I think 2 or 3 developers. Having said that, we do have an incubator that we let them build stuff for us. And then we've got some partnership like with Palantir where they're building for us, but we typically buy things.
Wow. Let's go down this path. So a lot of people are saying things like cloud first and cloud whatever. I don't know what to pit it against. How about cloud versus best fit? You know what I'm saying? Like cloud first versus like the best fit for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely in the best fit. I think, and part of that is I like to tell people clouds are a technical strategy. It's absolutely the wrong financial model. It's not cheaper. It's heavy OpEx versus CapEx. Our company likes OpEx or likes CapEx, not OpEx. So there's a real challenge there. So we do not just push everything into the cloud. We take a look at what is it we're trying to do? And is there some reason we need to go to the cloud? Does it give us some advantage? Are we looking at technical debt? Are we trying to get out of a data center? What is it? But we are not just cloud first. We take a look at anything we do when we come up for replatforming or technical debt erasure, for lack of a better term. We evaluate both and make the best decision.
I'll give you one last one. So clear strategy, plan, execute, or agile adaptation based on what's going on.
I'd say a little bit of both. I mean, there are some things like going to ERP, we're methodically marching to it, but the business requires us to be agile. I think the days of putting together a 5-year IT strategy and have everything come through one IT governance committee are probably difficult to pull off these days. You've got to be more agile than that. So a little bit of both, but I would say agility is becoming more and more important.
Let's talk about building out a team. So, as you're looking out to build out your team, let's start with the unconventional qualities that you look for in technology leaders that might not show up on the resume.
Yeah, I was just talking with my CISO, and he's got a few other things just the other day about this. And one of the things that he and I landed on was inquisitiveness. And that definitely doesn't come out. Is it aptitude or is it attitude? I think attitude often wins out. If I've got people that are just willing to figure it out and take the hard stuff and challenge, why can't we do it a different way? I think I get a heck of a lot further. Now, having said that, you got to have some technical competence too. I mean, you can't just come in and I'm really inquisitive, but I know nothing. That doesn't work at all. But I really enjoy people that in a respectful way say, well, why do we have to do it that way? Why can't we do it a different way?
That's the Ted Lasso principle, right? Be curious. Like,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, that was a great last episode of the first season was really good that way. So, it's interesting as a leader. One of the things you want to make sure is that the team that has the expertise feels the safety and whatever to speak up. How do you create an environment where people feel safe challenging you as a leader or challenging your assumptions?
I think some of it just needs to be, and this is hard for many of us. It's hard for me too. You have to be willing to say you're wrong sometimes. Like, I'm wrong. You're right. I think that goes a huge way, because if you just lock in, then people are like, why do I bother tell you? You're not going to listen to me anyway. So I think that's huge. And or I think the other piece is just sometimes come and go, hey, Bill, I don't know what to do here. Let's go figure it out. What do you think? Tell me. I've often also told people too, I'm only going to get mad at you if you know I'm going to get run over by a train and you don't tell me it's coming, right? That's the worst thing you can do. If you think it's really wrong, then you need to come and say, hey, I don't think it's the right thing. I encourage debate. I like debate. I would not want a team where everybody thinks the same and comes from the same background. I think that's the recipe for disaster. Having said that, we got to be respectful and debate each other, and it's not personal. And then when we do just make a decision, we need to close ranks and move on that. I don't want to hear for the next 10 years, well, I still disagree with it. That doesn't help anything. So I think if you do those things, I think the other thing is skip levels. Sometimes my VPs get mad. They're like, did you have to call so-and-so? Well, I'm like, you were busy and I need an answer. So I called Bob.
Yeah.
I also think that helps empower us to the next level and the next layer down to say, oh, he cares. I know who he is. Oh, I can drop by and if my boss isn't there and say, hey, I got a problem. Can I get help on that? I think that goes a long way too.
When I went in the morning, I used to just walk around the office, whoever happened to be in, I'd slide into their office or slide into their cubicle and have a conversation. And when I first started that practice, man, my direct reports got all antsy and concerned. And, why are you talking to them? I'm like, because they were in the office. I mean, literally, I wasn't seeking them out to talk about their thing. But if I see them in the morning and have a conversation, I'll be like, so what are you working on? Oh, yeah, we're having challenges with our PAC system, blah, blah, blah. And I'll tell you, it created, at first, it was a really uneasy kind of environment. It's like, hey, they're going to stop coming to me and going directly to you. I'm like, they're not going to do that. First of all, they have to find me. I'm too busy to do that. And second of all, you're going to change your leadership to make sure that you're listening to them and you're bringing that stuff to me. So they don't have to wait to find me to tell me those things. And it did change the culture, but it does take time.
Yep. It's the old Herb Kelleher management by walking around. Heck of a lot harder now that we're all virtual. Much harder. And that's part of what I'm all in on virtual. And most of our people do that. We've been doing it for a long time, given who we are. But I do miss that. Just being walking down the hall and somebody say, Al, you got 2 seconds. That's really hard in a virtual world.
How many states is Lifepoint in? Probably a lot.
35 to 40, somewhere in there. I don't know right off the top of my head. Partly because we built, I think, somewhere between 8 and 10 behavioral health and rehab facilities. So I'm sure we added some states this last year too.
Is your team equally as spread out, or is it mostly within near national?
Yeah, no, we're the amalgamation of a couple companies. So we've got a big concentration in Nashville, a big concentration in Louisville. But last time I looked at this, we're in about 18 different states because there's a lot of virtual people, just from an IT team perspective.
How do you keep your direct reports? How do you keep the leadership team in sync on the vision and the direction and the things that are going on?
Yeah, most of the people on the direct report into me, with a couple exceptions, live here. One lives near you and one lives out in Oklahoma. So, and actually one lives in Pennsylvania, now that I think of it. So most of them are here. That makes it a lot easier. But weekly meetings where we get together, we call it our HLT, and I have my list of things I want to go through, and any big decisions that are coming up from any of the domains, we bring them up so everybody's aware of it. And then it's a roundtable. I go one by one, like, hey, Bill, what do you want to tell everybody today? And if they don't come up with something, I'm usually like, hey, aren't you working on that? Yeah, tell the team about it. So we try to do that from an entire IT department. We have at a minimum in all hands once a month. And in there, anybody in the IT department can ask questions of me. I usually chair it, but everybody talks through and we go through all the big stuff. So it's definitely harder in a virtual world, but those are some things that we try to do.
What questions haven't I asked that you had prepared for? You thought, I mean, I'm sure he's going to ask me this.
Well, you and I talked about when we were down at one of the 229, a little bit about just, I guess, cost containment, efficiencies, and something kind of near and dear to maybe for-profit healthcare a little bit more than some of the other domains.
Well, the good news for us is that healthcare has moved beyond that. There's no need for any financial challenge. No, actually, to be honest with you, I mean, we just had a 229 up in Boston. It's still top of mind. It seems to be tied to a governance conversation, an inability for health systems to say no. In fact, they're almost, while asking for cuts, they're almost asking for more work to be done. And it boggles my mind every time I hear it. It's like, I want to get on a plane and fly to that health system and sit down with the senior leadership team, not the IT team, but the senior leadership team, and just go, hey, do you understand that you're going to have to say no to something? And good organizations will say no to things. And they're a lot of times they're very good things. You'll say, well, should we do a new cancer center or should we do a new, pediatrics ward? And you go, well, we only have resources for one. So we're going to do the pediatrics ward. And people go, well, don't you care about cancer? It's like, of course we care about cancer, but we can only do one and we will come back and evaluate that later. But it seems to me that there's an inability to make those difficult decisions anymore. And therefore we just let everything come out. But I would imagine that doesn't happen as much at Lifepoint, is my guess.
Yeah, I would say I'm blessed from that perspective. Our business ownership, especially when you talk about like your example there, a cancer center versus an OB or a women's center or something like that, we make those hard decisions pretty well. One of the things that's really nice about Lifepoint, we have a lot of disparity in kind of a complex environment, but it's relatively flat. I don't have 72 committees I have to run things by. We can usually get, I'll say 5, sometimes maybe a little more, 5 to 10 people at a max to make a decision, even big decisions, and that we move forward pretty quickly. So I think some of that comes from being not only for profit, but also being in the M&A world where you've got to make decisions, you've got to integrate people quickly, et cetera, that you have to make hard decisions. I think there's others, but we're kind of uniquely positioned that we are willing to make hard decisions and live with those. So that's a really good thing.
How much transparency do you provide them with regard to the workload within IT? I mean, do they understand it's like, hey, we're at 80% capacity, we're at 90, we're at 110? I mean, is that obvious?
I've got work to do there. It's not where it should be. I think to some degree, we just kind of keep throwing work on until eventually I go to people and go, Uncle, that's an it. We can't take any more, and kind of force it. And that's on me. I've got to do some work around that. So I don't think it's as transparent as it probably needs to be, and that people don't totally understand how many projects that we do get hit with. I think we've got 250 plus going right now of various sizes. So there's a bunch of them. So there's some work we got to do on that.
You being in the chair for the number of years you've been in, to a certain extent, when you go in and cry uncle, they go, okay, I mean, we've thrown too much. One of the things I coach people in these meetings, and I just say, look, I think you have to do that work. Otherwise, they just assume like, man, IT, we give you guys so much money. Of course, you can do anything. I mean, you have so many resources. It's like, no, we have a lot of systems. We have a lot of tech debt. We have a lot of legacy. There's a lot of work that it's hard to educate the organization on. Yeah, it looks like a lot of money, but it's a lot of stuff too. It's a lot of things.
Yeah. We went through a process probably 2 summers ago that was really good to do. And it was with our executive leadership team, and every department in our corporate office, which we call the HSC, had to do it, where we literally had to go team by team. So our corporate IT's got 375 to 400 people in it. And we literally went team by team, and they sat in with me for 2 hours, and we went, this is what this team does. We've got Meditech. We've got 6 people support that, and how many facilities and some key metrics. And we went through that. I think it was really enlightening for them to hear a lot of that, because a lot of times they're like, yeah, 400 people. I'm like, well, yeah, but we have a lot of small teams. And when you have every EMR known to mankind, you have a lot of little small teams. And when you add that up, suddenly you have a big team. So that was really good. I think the other thing was interesting on costs. For the last few years, we've gotten kind of bogeys. Go find X, right? You need to cut X from wherever inside IT. So I tell people, on one hand, we pulled all the T costs together. That's great. That's how you control it. That's how you understand it, and you can do some about it. You also put a massive bullseye right on your forehead, because now some people are like, holy cow, IT costs a lot. So a couple of things we did there. One was, I think we do a pretty good job of, vendor negotiations, et cetera, and anything over X amount, I stick it in front of the CFO and some of the leaders and say, okay, you sign here. Now, you know why we spend $1 million. It's 3M. You want to turn it off? Let's talk. Otherwise, we're going to renew. And so that's been good. The other thing we did was we created a list of, we didn't do this with core things like EMRs. We did it with things that I would call optional. Do you really need up-to-date? Do you really need some of these things that you could probably debate whether you really need them or not core things, foundational to the business. And through the CFO in this process, we went back and said, okay, legal, you own this. Why do you need a contract management system? Here's the spend. You defend it. Because the IT spend is ultimately the result of lots of people's decisions. It's not IT making those decisions. I didn't decide to put a new payroll system or install PACS or hemodynamic, et cetera. That was somebody else making that decision. The costs come to us. So trying to turn that around a little bit, just to say it's really business ownership that drives these costs. What is it that you all want to optimize?
Is there a single change that you made that unearthed a probably more money than you anticipated it was going to save?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. As part of moving to one consolidated ERP, we've finally pulled all spend because I had multiple GL systems. It was really hard to get to spend across vendors. And just the visibility to know all the different pockets and understand how many contracts, et cetera, has taken us time. That's been huge. Because if you don't know what that is and where it is and what the real spend is and how many contracts, I don't even know how you approach somebody. You can't approach and say, Bill, I've got 4 contracts for you. My spend's $1 million. You're missing half the thing. So that's number one. I think the second thing is by folks over the last few years saying, Al, and by saying Al, they're saying IT team. It's not me. Go find 15 million, example, one year. All of our leaders, AVPs and directors, they're all looking for opportunities. So it's just part of our DNA. And when they run into some contract at a facility sign that we didn't know about, they're always questioning, do you need this? Why can't you go to the standard vendor that we have? So making that more of a team sport and ingraining it into just sort of the DNA of how IT works has been huge, because not one person can do this. You got to have a whole bunch of people finding it and then negotiating and thinking about it.
So let's close with this. And there's a cliche question that I've heard asked, but it's always telling. And this is sort of a way to give advice to the next generation. It's if you could give a keynote to the class that's graduating here in May, and these people are, looking at potentially coming into a health IT or a healthcare technology type role, what would your message be to that graduating class?
I'd say a couple things. One is do this type of job because you want to make a difference. Don't do it because it's part of a career path or you just think you should make more. It's a tough job. Do it because you want to make a difference and you love to impact patients, your caregivers, et cetera. I think you have to have a passion for that. These are not easy jobs. You got to want to make a difference and you should make a difference. So that'd be one thing. I'd say back to sort of being inquisitive, continue to just challenge why. How can we operate better every day? All your teams. I tell people sometimes if you're doing the same thing you did 3 or 4 years ago, you're wrong by nature. You haven't been able to prove anything in 3 or 4 years, then you're not working hard enough. You're not thinking. We've got to do better. And as an industry, we've got to do better. And I think IT is a huge piece of that. And then the third thing I'd say is just love to learn. That's why I like my job, to be honest, more than anything is I get to learn all the time. I don't think there's too many days that I don't learn something from one of my team members, a clinician, a new workflow, something I didn't know. And if you just try to be a sponge and learn everything you can and then work really hard to do a good job, then I think you'll be in good shape in many cases.
I think you're in the perfect job for someone who came out of the consulting world. The consulting world, you're just constantly moving. There's always something changing and whatnot. I know when I was a healthcare CIO, it felt like every day was different, new challenges. Could be from meeting to meeting. You're like, wow, this is a really dynamic environment.
Yeah, there aren't too many people that get to, go work with HR and payroll, and then you're talking coding and CDI, and the next meeting you're in, you're talking to a physician about workflow. There aren't very many people get to do that inside of the organization. We're one of the few.
It's pretty amazing. Al, I want to thank you for your time and look forward to the next time we get to sit in one of the 229 meetings. I think it'll be fun.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this week's keynote. If you found value, share it with a peer. It's a great chance to discuss and in some cases start a mentoring relationship. One way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave us a rating. Love it if you could do that. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.